Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cal here, and today I'm going to be doing the 16th video for my 2021 NFL offseason recap series, the Arizona Cardinals. So, the Cardinals, after just narrowly missing the playoffs last year following a pretty aggressive offseason, look to add some pieces. They added a number of veterans this offseason as they look to return to the playoffs for the first time since 2015, but falling short of the playoffs despite being in a very tough division could lead to potentially Kliff Kingsbury's seat getting hot. Cardinals did not make any changes to their coaching staff last year, which is understandable given the progress they made from Kingsbury's rookie year in 2019 onto this year, and now the next step is going to be to make the playoffs. The free agents that the Cardinals retained, edge rusher Marcus Golden, who they had reacquired from the New York Giants ahead of last year's trade deadline, was signed to a 2-year deal. It's worth $5 million, up to $9 million with incentives for sacks and $2.5 million guaranteed. Golden had a breakout year in 2019 while with the Giants after he left Arizona the first time. He had kind of a tepid market in free agency and wound up re-signing with the Giants on a 1-year contract that was only like a slight raise over his previous deal, and he wasn't as great that year and was traded back to Arizona for a 6th-round pick where he was okay-ish for them. They kind of needed some edge rushing depth after losing Chandler Jones for the year with an injury, and so they bring him back on a pretty cheap contract, which he does have the upside to get a lot of pressures on, and we'll see what he does. Right tackle Kelvin Beachum re-signed to a 2-year deal worth $4 million. $3.075 million of it is guaranteed, $2.325 million fully guaranteed. Beachum was a late signing by the Cardinals last offseason, and he wound up becoming their starting right tackle. He's been between right and left tackle for a lot of his career. He started at right tackle with the Steelers and moved to left tackle for the Jaguars and then for the New York Jets, and then back to right tackle with Arizona, where he did pretty solid there, and it's another team-friendly, cheap contract for a veteran. Edge rusher Dennis Garneck was brought back as a restricted free agent on the 2nd-round level, so $3.384 million with no guarantees. And Garneck had somewhat of a breakout year last year, although it was brought to an end because of a torn ACL he suffered late in the season that he's still working his way back from. Inside linebacker Tanner Vallejo, a special teamer, was re-signed to a 2-year deal worth $3.3 million. It has $800,000 in incentives and $1.1 million of it is guaranteed. Restricted free agent linebacker Zeke Turner was brought back at the right of first refusal tender, which is 1 year, $2.133 million, no guarantees, also a special teamer. Punter Andy Lee was re-signed to a 1-year contract worth $1.5 million with $600,000 guaranteed. Safety Chris Banjo, who was the starter for a good chunk of last year, was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million. $68,750 was guaranteed. He was mostly a special teamer during his earlier days with the Saints and possibly with the Eagles. This is really his kind of first full-time starting experience last year. Defensive tackle Corey Peters, who's been with the Cardinals for a while and one of their leaders, was just recently re-signed just a few days ago to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million. Nothing is guaranteed, however. Peters' season also came to an early end last year as he suffered a biceps injury. He's healthy now and hoping to run it back with Arizona and help lead them back to the playoffs. Guard Max Garcia was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million with $687,500 guaranteed. Tight end Darrell Daniels, who's kind of known for his blocking, was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million with $562,500 guaranteed. Safety Charles Washington was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million with $68,750 guaranteed. And edge rusher Kylie Fitz was brought back as an exclusive rights free agent for 1 year and $920K. All right, now onto their free agent signings. Their only signing that was in 8 figures, as they signed defensive end J.J. Watt, a longtime Houston Texan, to a 2-year contract worth $28 million, up to $31 million. $23 million of it is guaranteed, $20 million being fully guaranteed at signing after he was released by Houston. And they signed Watt in order to help pair him with Jones to form an elite pass rushing duo. Watt isn't the guy that he once was several years ago. He's been injured in 3 of the past 4 seasons. And he's coming off kind of a down year for his standards, despite being healthy for a lot of the year. I should say actually he's been injured 3 of the past 5 seasons, and he was healthy in 2018 and 2020, but we'll see what he does with a change of scenery and maybe play next to Chandler Jones, depending on that contract situation, which we'll talk about later. They signed kicker Matt Prater, former Lion and Bronco, to a 2-year contract worth $6.5 million, up to $7.5 million. $3.775 million of it is guaranteed, with $2.925 million fully guaranteed. He's still one of the more consistent kickers in the game, and he'll provide an upgrade over the Cardinals kicking from last year. They signed longtime Bengals receiver A.J. Green to a 1-year deal worth $6 million, up to $8.5 million, and it's fully guaranteed. Green, who was taken in the same draft class as Watt, has also been dealing with age and decline as of late. He missed all of 2019 due to injury. He was injured for a decent chunk of 2018 as well. And this past year, he looked kind of washed while with the Bengals, as other guys like Tyler Boyd got production for their offense. And so the Bengals moved on from Green, and the Cardinals are hoping that having Green be a number 2 receiver behind DeAndre Hopkins will help him somewhat revive his career. Cornerback Malcolm Butler, best known for that play in the Super Bowl while with the Patriots, was signed to a 1-year deal. It's worth $3.25 million, fully guaranteed. He had been released by Tennessee this offseason. And ever since that play made in the Super Bowl, like he's had a couple of solid years with the Patriots, not really spectacular, and his time with the Titans has not been super great. He was injured for a lot of 2019 and I think some of 2020 as well, and Tennessee, who needed some cap space, wound up releasing him. They signed former Steelers running back James Conner to a 1-year deal worth $1.75 million, and it's fully guaranteed. Conner was pretty solid his first year as a full-time starter, which was in 2018 when Le'Veon Bell sat out the season. But since then, he's dealt with injuries and hasn't been very consistent running the ball, so he's a change of scenery bounce-back candidate. They signed former Jets and Bills guard Brian Winters to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million, $987,500 guaranteed. He has a lot of starting experience. He was a starter for quite a while with the Jets, and he got some starts in last year for the Bills. So he'll add some experience depth for that Cardinals O-line. They signed veteran quarterback Colt McCoy to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million, $137,500 guaranteed. He spent last year with the New York Giants, getting I think at least 1, maybe 2 starts in when Daniel Jones was injured, and he actually led the Giants to a victory over the Seattle Seahawks. So he hasn't quite lived up to the expectations that made him a high draft pick out of Texas back with the Cleveland Browns, but he still sticked around as a viable backup. They signed another former Bengal, safety Sean Williams, 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million, $68,750 guaranteed, so the exact same contract as Chris Banjo, and in fact they were signed on the same day. Williams shifted to a number 3 safety role last year after the Bengals brought in Von Bell in free agency. And so we will see if Williams is a depth signing or if Williams will be potentially a starter. They signed former Bengals and Falcons cornerback Darqueze Dennard to a 1-year deal worth $1.075 million, no guarantees. Spent last year with Atlanta, but he missed time due to injuries. They signed former Raiders, Cowboys, Eagles, Panthers corner Daryl Worley to a one-year deal worth of $990K, no guarantees. He was a starter in 2019 for the Raiders, left for the Cowboys in 2020. He was released mid-season when the Cowboys couldn't find a trade partner for him. He was on the Bills practice squad, and then the Raiders brought him back and poached him off of Buffalo's practice squad, and now he'll be looking for a role with Arizona. They signed defensive tackle Xavier Williams to a one-year deal worth $990K with no guarantees. That's kind of a homecoming for Williams because he was with he was originally signed as an undrafted free agent by the Cardinals. Since then, he's been with the Bengals. He's been with the Chiefs. I think he's been with the Buccaneers. He may have been with the Patriots as well. They signed tight end Ross Travis, former Chief, Colt, and Jet, to a one-year deal worth $990K with no guarantees. They signed former Falcons running back Ito Smith just yesterday to a one-year contract worth $920K, no guarantees. Atlanta wound up waiving him this offseason despite him having taken over the starting job at the end of the year from Todd Gurley. They signed receiver Greg Dortch, former Jets, former Panther. I think he's been with some other teams as well, to a one-year deal worth $780,000 with no guarantees. They signed tackle Ryan Pope to a one-year deal worth $660,000 with no guarantees. They signed offensive lineman Brandon Bowen, former Panther, to a one-year deal worth $660,000 with no guarantees. They signed wide receiver Andre McKelly to a one-year deal worth $660,000 with no guarantees. Running back Tavian Feaster, linebacker Jamel Garcia-Williams, wide receiver Antoine Wesley, punter Tyler Newsome, center Marcus Henry, and wide receiver Aleva Hifo were some of their other low-cost signings to round up the back end of their roster. So again, Cardinals didn't spend a whole ton of money in free agency. Their biggest signing far and away was J.J. Watt, and no one else was even at the $10 million mark. For their cuts, they only had two of them. Tackle Marcus Gilbert elected to retire. The Cardinals acquired Gilbert from the from the Pittsburgh Steelers in a salary dump during the 2019 season, but he missed all of that year due to injury. They re-signed him to a one-year deal because when healthy, he was really good with the Steelers, but injuries were an issue for him. So they re-signed him to a one-year deal in 2020, but he opted out of the season, so that 1 year told over to this year, and Gilbert elected to retire. They also cut backup center Lamont Gaillard, a 6th-round draft pick in 2019 out of Georgia. He started a couple of games at center for them last year because of injuries, and he was claimed by the Bengals off of waivers. Their free agent departures, running back Kenyon Drake signed a 2-year deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. He played under the transition tag last year. Longtime cornerback Patrick Peterson signed a 1-year deal with the Vikings. Edge rusher Hassan Reddick, who had a really good breakout year last year after being written off as a first-round bust, signed a 1-year deal with the Carolina Panthers, reuniting with his college head coach Matt Rule. Tight end Dan Arnold also signed with the Panthers on a 2-year deal. Veteran corner Jonathan Joseph, who they had added mid-season after being cut by Tennessee, retired. Linebacker Devondre Campbell signed with the Packers. Guard J.R. Sweezy signed with the New Orleans Saints. Quarterback Brett Hundley signed with the Colts following news of Carson Wentz's foot injury. Defensive lineman Angelo Blackson signed with the Chicago Bears. Cornerback Kevin Peterson signed with the Tennessee Titans. Running back DJ Foster signed in the Canadian Football League. And receiver Trent Sherfield was non-tendered as a restricted free agent, and he signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Their unsigned free agents, edge rusher Josh Morrow was waived from IR, as was kicker Zane Gonzalez. Both of them remain unsigned. The most notable name would be Larry Fitzgerald, who was undecided about whether he wants to give it one more go or wants to retire, and maybe we'll find out soon. Cornerback Dre Kirkpatrick, defensive tackle Domata Pecco, kicker Mike Nugent, tight end Seth DeVolve, and linebacker Isaiah Irving are also other guys that are unsigned free agents at this time. For trades, Arizona first, they acquired Rodney Hudson from the Las Vegas Raiders. Vegas also sent over a 7th-round pick, and the Cardinals picked up a 3rd-rounder, or the Cardinals sent a 3rd-rounder to Las Vegas to acquire the veteran center, who's still one of the best in the game. It was initially reported that the Raiders were going to be releasing Hudson, but oftentimes teams will leak that they're releasing a player to try and get someone to trade for him, and that's exactly what Arizona did. And it was like, well, there's a big difference between losing him for nothing by cutting him and getting a 3rd-round pick for him. But we'll talk about that in the Raiders video. Arizona signed him to a new contract, 3 years, $30 million, $16 million of it guaranteed, $10.9 million fully guaranteed. I don't remember if Hudson had 2 years left in his deal when he was moved, or maybe 3. So, yeah. He's still, he's still really, really good, and he'll provide veteran leadership to anchor the center of that offensive line, and he's a significant upgrade over what they had. And then following that, a few weeks later, they traded away their incumbent starting center, Mason Cole, to the Minnesota Vikings for just a 6th-round pick. Cole was a full-time starter as a rookie in 2018, but he struggled. Lost the starting job in 2019 to A.Q. Shipley. The Cardinals let Shipley, didn't re-sign Shipley, and gave Cole another chance last year to be a starter, but wasn't much better than he was as a rookie. And now he'll likely be a backup center in Minnesota. And the Cardinals also traded away a 4th-round pick in 2022 to the Baltimore Ravens to move up in the NFL draft. They moved up from the 5th round into the back end of the 4th round, and they also picked up an extra 6th from the Ravens. As the Cardinals, after having traded their 3rd for Hudson, and they also had traded their 4th-rounder as part of last year's trade for DeAndre Hopkins, the Cardinals didn't have a whole ton of draft capital, and now they're already down a 4th-rounder in 2022. So now on to their draft picks. They took Tulsa linebacker Zaven Collins with the 16th overall pick. With the 17th pick in the 2nd round, they took Purdue wide receiver Rondale Moore, so yet another receiver for Kliff, Kingsbury, and Kyler Murray. And then the guy they traded up for in the 4th round, 31st pick in the 4th round, they took cornerback Marco Wilson. With the 26th pick in the 6th round, they took edge rusher Victor Dimukeje. With the 39th pick in the 6th round, which is the extra pick they got from the Giants, I believe, in the Golden trade, they took cornerback Tay Gowan. With the 15th pick in the 7th round, they took safety James Wiggins. And with the 19th pick in the 7th round, they took cornerback Michael Manet. The Cardinals have not signed any players to extensions. Injuries thus far, we mentioned Gardeck is coming off of that torn ACL. He's trying to be ready for Week 1, but if not, he may miss just a few games before being cleared. And then J.J. Watt, he's dealing with a hamstring injury, and so the Cardinals are being cautious with him. He has yet to practice at training camp. So now my thoughts on the Cardinals offseason. I thought the Cardinals, they had an interesting offseason. Now, I have seen one comparison because the Cardinals added a lot of really older players like Watt and Hudson and Green and Butler and whatnot. I saw that they were comparing that to what the Indianapolis Colts did with Andrew Luck on his rookie deal, was they surrounded him with a lot of veterans, which led to some early postseason success. But once Luck started to get expensive and had to get his contract, wasn't on the rookie contract anymore, then what happened was either those veterans had to be moved away because they were priced out, or they were just old and their declines occurred, and the Colts didn't draft well enough to replace them. And that led to the Colts having lean years, and then Luck being injured because he took so much pressure behind that offensive line, and, well, he retired early. So I have seen that comparison floated out there, and the Cardinals' O-line is older. Hudson, Beachum, DJ Humphries, Justin Pugh, those guys have been around the league for quite a while. And this is Kyler Murray's 3rd year, which means that after this year, he's up for a new contract. So the Cardinals have to then hope that either the cap increases that are rumored to come in 2023, which is Murray's last year of his rookie deal, do happen so that they can afford to keep more players around. and also that they are able to draft well enough to continue to replenish the team with young talent, so they aren't left with a very lean roster full of declining veterans and unproven young players at certain positions. And so, other than other than that, I thought the Cardinals had like probably an off season. I'd give them maybe I'd say a C plus off season because there are some risks there. Obviously, Watt's got injuries, AJ Green's got injuries, and he's older. And so, yeah. For the specific positions of need that I mentioned in the offseason preview video for the Cardinals, I listed corner. I do not think they really addressed the cornerback position that well. Butler isn't a bad addition, and $3.25 million is a bargain. But he's getting older, and he never really was that great. Like at his height, he was a good corner, but he's a little bit lower than that, and he's basically like average at this point. And their other starting corner is either going to be Daryl Worley, who's been inconsistent, has had off-field issues, or it's going to be like Robert Alford, who they signed in 2019, but he hasn't played for the Cardinals yet because he's been injured both the past 2 years. Arizona did release him and then re-sign him to a cheaper contract, but still, their cornerback room, their two starting outside corners are old, have injuries, and aren't even like that great to begin with. I mentioned defensive line, that definitely was addressed by bringing back Peters and also signing J.J. Watt, obviously, so that was addressed. Tight end was also a position that they missed addressing on as they let Dan Arnold walk. Arnold is closer to good than great, so it's not that significant of a departure, but they really missed an opportunity to upgrade here. And unless the Cardinals decide to maybe get aggressive and trade for Zach Ertz from the Philadelphia Eagles and get a significant upgrade there, they're going to have to that's going to be what they're stuck with. For their secondary needs, I mentioned running back, and they did address that by bringing in Connor and Ito Smith. I was kind of surprised they did not take a running back in the draft, in all honesty, but bringing in those two veterans, I think, is decent. I mentioned offensive line. They did address that, upgrading from Mason Cole at center with Rodney Hudson, and then bringing back Beachum at right tackle was nice. And then safety, yeah, they addressed that, bringing back Chris Banjo, and then bringing in Sean Williams as well. So all in all, they did address some positions of need, but they didn't spend a whole lot of money, and they didn't have a ton of draft picks, so they didn't have a ton to work with, in all honesty. And I feel like they could have done better, like at corner and at tight end specifically. Those are the two positions I think that are kind of weak right now. And especially with the news that like Xavier Howard and the Dolphins got that contract situation resolved, I would have had the Cardinals as a logical fit for Howard if they were to trade for him. It would have been costly, but I think it would have been worth it. But now that's not going to happen now that he and the Dolphins are in good terms now, as of this morning. And then tight end, they still could trade for Zach Ertz, but are they willing to give up another draft asset? Because they've already given up a 4th-round pick for next year. Are they willing to give up a 3rd-rounder next year for a guy who is an older player? Like Ertz has been around since I think 2012. He's already 30 years old. He's also in a contract year, which means the Cardinals would likely have to negotiate a new contract with him immediately, which is somewhat of a risk if he gets injured again. So, yeah, again, overall, C+ of an offseason. They have talent on both sides of the ball, but they do have some glaring weaknesses. And, again, they are even though the NFC as a whole is not very good, their conference is by far and away the best in the NFC and possibly the best in the entire NFL. Alright, so the Cardinals' projected starters. So quarterback will be Kyler Murray, obviously. Running back is a competition, as James Conner and Chase Edmonds have been competing for the running back 1 spot, and neither one has currently seized it as of yet. DJ Humphries will start at left tackle, Justin Pugh at left guard, Rodney Hudson at center, Justin Murray at right guard, and Kelvin Beachum at right tackle. Wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins and AJ Green will be the 1 and the 2. The number 3, I think, is going to be some kind of a competition between Obviously, more will be in the mix, but recent draft picks Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella figure to try to make noise there. And then Max Williams will be their starting tight end. Williams actually was solid-ish in 2019, and he has a second-round pick, but he has had injuries while early with the Ravens. But again, a position that the Cardinals certainly could have done a better job at. Defensive line will be J.J. Watt. I'm going to have Peters reprise his starting role, and then Jordan Phillips. Linebacker will have Chandler Jones. Now, Jones did request a trade after not having gotten a new contract. So this would be his third contract. He's still a very good pass rusher, but he is coming off of a biceps injury that caused him to miss about 2/3 of the season. And he is starting to get older, so it is somewhat of a risk, and we'll see how that situation plays out. Do the Cardinals sign him to a new contract, or do they trade him, or does Jones agree to play out the final year of his deal? Middle linebacker, they're going to have their two most recent first-round picks, Collins and Isaiah Simmons, be their two starters, which pushes Jordan Hicks into a backup role. The Cardinals have given Hicks permission to seek a trade, but as of right now, he remains a Cardinal. And then the other edge rushing spot will probably go down to either Golden or Gardeck, depending on health. Cornerback, Malcolm Butler will be the 1. Robert Alford will be the 2, although Alford could get pushed by Daryl Worley. And then Byron Murphy will start in the slot. And then safety will be Budda Baker, and then either it'll be Banjo or Williams or possibly Jalen Thompson. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next offseason recap video.